Hello, you wonderful, beautiful, awesome struggler. It's me, Ryan. How you doing? It's been a couple months since our last plog, and I'm really excited to be checking in with you here. I hope you're having a good summer, or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, a good winter. And I speak from experience because I just recently got back from Australia, where it was indeed winter. It was cold, and for half the trip, very, very rainy. But then for the other half of the trip, it was absolutely perfect, crisp, like autumn conditions. It was, if you're on the Fahrenheit scale, kind of mid 40s, low 50s, dry, absolutely beautiful. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But this plog here, this plog here is going to start from a place of struggle because it has been more struggle than not over the last month. And I kind of have to do an update, I guess, here over the last 2 months. So let me look at the goals. Let me just quickly, I start these by looking at my goals. I lay out my monthly goals in my journal, as well as now in my Intentional Climber app, which I've been using more than the paper journal, to be honest. Although I do use the paper journal every night. In fact, I write something in my 5-year training and performance journal every single night because I really enjoy the reflective element of that. So each year I can kind of see where I was at on this day the prior year. So I still do that, but I'm doing more thoughts in there. I'm not doing as many like specifics about my training. It's just more about like kind of where am I at? Where's emotionally and mentally and like kind of bigger picture physically, like if I'm feeling really fatigued or something. And then in my app, in the Intentional Climber app, I have my specific goals for each week, which then roll up into monthly goals. And of course, all of my like super specific nerdy training things and my reflections on every single session that I've ever had. So I don't know. It's like reflective overload for me over here, but I just love it. I love reflecting. It actually brings quite a bit of joy to my day, like kind of the day-to-day grind, but also it has helped me in a huge way to identify what's working and just as importantly, what's not working so I can make changes in my training and in my kind of planning and goal setting and all of that. So let's start with June. I'm going to uncork the struggle bottle of champagne here in just a second. But let's like just kind of recap goals for June. So my June goals, I only had 3. I wanted to climb outside for 2 days. I wanted to have my first Treadwall session, and I wanted to send a Kilter V8. And I only did one of those. I had my first Treadwall session. And I'll talk more about the Treadwall in a minute, but I was psyched I set that as a goal because I have been looking at the Treadwall parts. It's just been in pieces for over a year in my garage. And I was like, we got to get this thing up. So I set the goal and we got it up. And it times out well because I really want to start focusing on training up my endurance and my power endurance for fall season goals at the Red and having that Treadwall in my garage, which I found on Marketplace. If you all have been following along, I found a Treadwall on Marketplace. I've been a big fan of Treadwall for years, training on them and just like the idea of being able to just constantly climb and not have to down climb, not have to do circles. It's freaking amazing. So I found one on Marketplace and it's been sitting in my garage for a year and now it's up. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute. The other goal is 2 days outside. I got 1 Kilter V8, not even close. You know what's funny? Climbing. I mean, like, I never even did a Kilter V8 when I sent Bulldog, which was my outdoor V8, because the full ride board that I have is harder than like the OG. I think I could go and just hop on like a Kilter board at a gym, the Kilter OG board, and probably do V9, to be perfectly honest. But the full ride is a different beast. It is much closer to like what an outdoor climbing grade would be, and pretty sandbagged, in fact. And so I don't think I even did a V6. I think I did a V6 in June. No V7s, I don't think. Anyway, that was June. And then I'll talk about July in a second here because I guess the struggle bus departed in like late June, just before I took a family trip to Los Angeles and then Australia. My sister's family lives in Australia, so it was predominantly a holiday trip, although I did climb one day in Australia. But the struggle bus was kind of like a tale of two Ryans because I was jamming, if you remember my last plug, like working out hard, training hard, running. I introduced running and I was really enjoying it, like a couple days of moderate, like 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, just kind of getting some good cardio, but getting out early in the morning and just feeling like I was accomplishing something before the kids woke up. Loving all of that. And then I took a trip to Chicago to visit my boys, my high school. I mean, some of these guys go back to elementary school, if you can believe that. But then we really kind of like coalesced as a best friend group in high school. Many of us were college roommates. And then we've stayed in touch ever since. They're like my homies and they're my brothers. I mean, at this point in time, we go back to many of us to elementary school. They're my brothers. So we had a little get together in Chicago and we didn't go like hard. We didn't rage or anything like that. We got an Airbnb and we, had some beers and went out to an improv show and got some food and slept on a weird bed and probably wasn't hydrating as much as I wanted to. Although I did wake up early one day and ran through the kind of streets of Chicago and found a cool park to loop around a lake. And I felt fit, but I think what happened is then it's like a 6-hour drive. And so I got in the car on the Sunday morning after staying up way too late and watching World Cup soccer and all that. And then I drove home. And as soon as I got home, my kids wanted to go for a bike ride and I was ready to rock. I missed them. And so just like one of those classic things where I got out and I got my bike out and my tire was low. And so I bent over to pump it up and I fully threw my back out. You guys, me with my back. Are you sick of hearing about my back? I think like 80% of adults have back issues, so maybe you can relate. But the last time I threw out my back really bad, as you might recall, was when I was bouldering in Vegas at the Craft Boulders. And I came off of a boulder and just kind of landed in a weird way. It wasn't like a crazy, like wild fall, but I just landed weird and jacked my back up there. And then I put out a video that ended up becoming a pretty popular video on my new climbing channel called Ryan Devlin Climbing. If you haven't checked it out, there's some videos over there that I think are pretty good. They're personal. It's more personal than like the struggle show. But anyway, there's like some training hacks and also just some like personal vlog type things. And I put out a video posing the question, am I too old for bouldering? And the answer is resoundingly no. At least that's what the conclusion I came to, because I recovered from the back injury and trained hard. And then I went and sent the hardest thing I've ever sent. I jumped 4 V grades. I went from V4 to V8 by sending Bulldog. And so, no, I'm not too old for bouldering, but maybe I'm too old to pump up a bike tire. Oh, God. I guess just that's kind of the takeaway there, is that when I've got a herniated disc from an old hockey injury, and when you've got something like that, it's not necessarily going to be triggered or inflamed by any sort of sport-related thing. Sometimes it's when I sneeze. Sometimes I'm showering. Sometimes I'm pumping up a bike tire. Sometimes I'm bouldering, but that's actually the only time I've ever done it. And that was just like a weird landing. So I don't know. I was pretty discouraged. I have to say, things got progressively darker after that because this was actually a really bad one. And so I talked to my doctor and he put me on like prednisone, which is systemic anti-inflammatory, which oftentimes takes the edge off of something like this, like when it's the inflammation of the disc is pushing on that sciatic nerve, but it did not take the edge off. And then it was just like a handful of days later when we were going on this big trip. And when I'm talking big trip, I'm talking big fucking trip, you guys. We went to LA, then we went to Melbourne, Australia, and then back to LA, then Chicago, and then back home. That's just by way of like connecting flights. But it was so many hours of flying and heavy suitcases, and I was really in pain. I was wearing like those icy hot lidocaine patches and taking it just like heroic doses of Advil and Tylenol. And then I was on this prednisone, and then I called my doctor. I was like, it is not touching it. And so he gave me, I forgot the name of it right now, but it's a stronger steroid, still an oral steroid. And steroids in general I don't sleep. If I take prednisone, I call it my limitless pill because I'll sleep for 3 hours and then wake up as if I got 12 hours of sleep and I'll just rock. Usually I'm not doing anything super active because I'm feeling injured, but I'll just work like crazy or read or do some sort of house project that's not too injurious feeling. And so with this extra strong steroid, I was extra not sleeping and jet lag. So when we got to Australia, for example, like I was waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning and then just being up all day. And it was kind of nice on the one hand because everybody was sleeping and it's wintertime there. So it's very dark and it was rainy for the first few days we were there. And so I just like have a fire in the fireplace and I started reading A River Runs Through It, which is just like such a well-written, beautiful poetic, heartbreaking, lovely book, little novel. And I recommend it. I don't know. I was just like, it was something my brother-in-law had on his shelf. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And I'm so glad that I read it. And anyway, it was kind of nice in that sense, but it was also, I just started to feel really discouraged like 2 weeks in, and my back was still really bad. I brought my force board to Australia and to LA to try to make sure I could keep the fingers going. And I had all these power endurance workouts that I was going to do that Tyler Nelson recommended, where I was like doing power endurance finger curls at like 80%, 7 on, 3 off. You've probably heard me talk about in prior blogs and posts. I did an episode with Dr. Tyler Nelson all about critical force. And basically the takeaways of that test that I did, the critical force test, which was absolutely fucking heinous, was, I'm sorry, I'm swearing, was that my power endurance really lacked. And whereas I was originally thinking I really needed to develop like aerobic endurance for Red River Gorge climbing, and no doubt that will be helpful to develop, and I'm working on that still in my training. The main focus, or at least the main weakness that this test and Tyler's analysis helped to identify, is that my power endurance drops off super fast. So I've got pretty strong fingers relative to where I'm at, and I've got a decent aerobic base. So my critical force, when it levels off, is decent. I think it's like high 30% range, 38, 39% critical force, like my aerobic capacity. Basically, I could do like 38% of my max indefinitely, or close to indefinitely, as long as I'm fueling myself. But what dropped off super fast was my power endurance. So essentially my ability to make hard moves is not very well developed, in that I could only make a few hard moves and then that power endurance tank is gone. And in conversation with Tyler, he was like, well, if you're trying to do hard routes at the Red, that's going to be power endurance for you. You need to make a lot of relatively hard moves in a row, not limit moves, but not easy moves. So kind of around that 70 to 80% range. And if you haven't done this already, Tyler created what's called the Critical Force Field Test that's in the Intentional Climber app, and it's so nice. It's like probably one of the coolest features the app has right now, if I'm being perfectly honest, because you can do this test and it only takes like maybe a half hour on a hangboard. And you do it and you immediately get not only your results, your critical force results, but also an analysis from Tyler based on your results that'll tell you, or at least give you ideas. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but it's going to give you ideas on how to improve whatever is lacking, whatever results. So it might be max strength, it might be power endurance in my case, or it might be like aerobic endurance. And so anyway, if you do that critical force test, you can get these results like I did. And mine pointed to power endurance. And so I had planned to do, while I was traveling, a bunch of these power endurance repeaters. And I got to do exactly one session in 3 weeks because I just couldn't, my back wouldn't allow me to like pull against the ground. I could hang, but I didn't have a hang setup. And so curling into the gripper, the edge, I was using a specialized masochism, like unlevel edge. And I brought that and a sling and my force board force gauge. It's like travel's really small, really light. Would have been great if my back didn't hurt, but like looping it around my foot or something else and like pulling into it, like as if I was pulling myself into the ground, actually hurt my back quite a bit. So I couldn't do it, and I couldn't find a way to rig it up. It was too like rainy and wet and stuff to like go outside and find a tree branch to sling it around. I couldn't find anything in the Airbnb. And also I just didn't feel great. I was jet lagged out of my freaking mind. And so I didn't train. And that kind of made me feel a little bit bumming. I couldn't run, I couldn't lift, and I couldn't even do like my kind of supplementary travel training like I wanted to do. On the flip side, I did have some fun. In LA, we took the kids to Universal Studios and we went to Malibu and the beach and we saw a lot of friends because I used to live in LA, and that was lovely. The 17-hour flight to Melbourne wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be with a couple of kids. They just like crushed movies. I crushed movies. It was actually surprisingly chill. And then getting there was awesome and seeing family. And so like good times were had, but in terms of my psyche around my training, I felt like I was on this really good upward trajectory. And then it all just came to a screeching halt for like basically a full month. So I was just kind of feeling pouty. I was feeling pouty about that. And you ever feel pouty? You ever just like feel sorry for yourself? It kind of feels silly on the one hand, but it's also real. Like those emotions are real and you got to honor them. And so I was bumming. And also when you have chronic pain, everything is filtered through that. So I don't care what, chronic pain you have. It's a toothache or a backache or, you break a toe and every step you take kind of hurts. Just like your overall demeanor and psyche and vibe are filtered through that. And so for me, every time I had to get up from a seated position, I had to put my hands on my knees and like generate momentum by using my upper body to kind of assist my lower body. And I had to find things to lean against and all that. And so, yeah, I was just kind of bumming and I feel better now. And so I can kind of look back on that period with a little bit of a smile and fondness, knowing that I'm through it. But when you're in it, you're just freaking in it. Also, my dog died, and that was such a bummer. He was the sweetest. And so like during this time, I was like really missing my dog. Shout out to people who have dogs and who have lost dogs. I've lost a lot of dogs because we love dogs, and so we have a lot of dogs. The best way to get over losing a dog is to just get another dog. And so that's why we got a puppy about 6 months ago, because we knew this guy, my buddy Percy, was on, maybe his last days. And then he just had this amazing like finish line sprint where it looked like he was going downhill in February. And then like he had this beautiful few months where he was just like himself again. And then he fortunately went downhill really fast in his last couple of days. And then we had to say goodbye. But that really affected me too. That's the allostatic load that we've talked about on this. I've talked about it with Hazel Finlay, with Ethan Pringle, with Tom Randall, which is basically like if there's a lot going on in life outside of climbing, whether that's job stress, school stress, relationship stress, sadness, depression, all these kinds of things, even if you get a ton of sleep and you're eating well and all that stuff, that load is in you and it can affect in major ways how you climb or how you train. And so like that hit me along with travel stress, along with being injured. And it was just like some kind of grim days for a little bit there. Fortunately, I'm on the other side. So let's talk about that. Oh, let me say, I will say like a bright shining light in my time in Australia as it related to my climbing. There were a million bright shining lights of just like hanging out with my sister and my nephews and all of that. Australia is freaking amazing. I cannot wait to go back on a climbing centric trip because I got one day out in the Grampians, the famous Grampians, which is like a couple hours from my sister lives outside of Melbourne. So it was like a 2-hour drive, which is like the drive that we take to get to the Red from Louisville. And it is stunningly beautiful. We got a splitter blue sky day of like maybe 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm sorry, I don't even know what that is. 20 degrees Celsius? I don't know. In any case, it was like splitter conditions. And our friend Dusty Millar, who was a Weekend Warrior guest on this show, was gracious enough to take myself and my sister and my son and her son, my nephew, out for a day in the Grampians. And we went to a really cool crag called I Forget. That's the name of the crag. And apparently it was named because all the crags were closed during COVID, I think to keep people safe. And so rescue crews didn't need to take unnecessary risks and these kinds of things. But they forgot to close that crag. Maybe it was a new crag at the time or something. I forgot. But that's why they named it I Forget. But it was awesome. And it was like being at the Red River Gorge, which is crazy. It's like beautiful pocketed steep sandstone, like overhung sandstone. And it was funny, like I could drive 2 hours to get to the Red, or I could fly 23 hours and have debilitating jet lag to go to what is essentially the Red River Gorge in Australia. But I'm so glad I did because it doesn't at all look like the Red. You hike up. These are cliffs that are like mountain cliffs rather than the gorge is a gorge. So it's like kind of you go down like you're climbing in the Grand Canyon. But it's filled with waterfalls and trees, and the Red is absolutely stunningly beautiful. But in a different way, the Grampians are absolutely mega, and it's obviously very, very historic. And I didn't, sadly, I didn't get out to see like the most historic routes that are there, but I was among those rocks, and I can't wait to go back and sample some of those really, really like historically significant climbing routes that are around there, and maybe get over to Arapiles as well. But we did get out for a day of moderate climbing, which was great. And then I got on one hard thing that Dusty flashed because he's a freaking boss. It was his hardest flash ever. And I think the grade worked out to be 12CD. I think it was maybe an Australian 28, 27 or 28. I don't actually remember, but I like the Australian grading system. It's just like numbers. rather than like all these letters and pluses and minuses and all that. But in any case, it was hard as freaking nails. I saw Dusty flash it, and like the dude dug deep. It was so cool to witness because he was like throwing and latching and like hanging on for dear life and bossing this like super bouldery crux. It was really, really inspiring to see, and I was so hyped for him. And then I got on it, and again, I mean, I've got every excuse in the book, which I love, but back injury, jet lag, hadn't been climbing or training because of said back injury and travel and all that stuff. But I like 6-hung the route or something like that. I freaking epicked on it. But that was okay. I wasn't trying to perform. It was really fun to be on a hard route on that Grampian sandstone. But then my happiest routes were the moderates we did. We did like 3 or 4 just like real chill routes. I mean, probably somewhere between like 5.6 and 5.8 in the YDS grading system, or I guess that would be like a 4C to 5B, maybe something like that. Anyway, that was so fun, and the views were amazing. And that was a wonderful day, and saw some great wildlife. So that was a shining moment of my climbing in that trip. And then we got back home. Let's bring things current and talk about July goals. I'm going to reopen the Intentional Climber app. And I know July's not closed yet, but I've closed out almost every single goal, which is great. But let me read to you what those goals were. 1 outside fun day. Check that one off in Australia. 1 outside power endurance day. Check that one off just a couple days ago as I'm recording this at the Red. Start my training plan, which I have done, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Nate Drolet wrote that for me. Do a Kilter V6. I have not done it, but I think I'm going to do it after I record this. So updates to come. I think I'm feeling snappy enough where I will be able to do that. And then last one was enjoy vacation. I liked having that one on there. It just kind of reminded me. And I definitely checked that one off. I enjoyed my vacation. So the only goal I haven't completed this month is the Kilter V6. The month isn't over. I think I'll do it. So that would be 100% goals completed in this month, which now I'm feeling good again. I was on the struggle bus. I guess I'm still on the struggle bus, but I was kind of on the sad bus, and now I'm on the happy bus because I feel good. And when you feel good, your emotional like level, your kind of emotional cup and happiness feels good. And that's fortunately where I'm at right now. My back is still a little bit touchy. I haven't started running again, and I'm actually not sure I'm going to, at least for another couple of weeks. Maybe that's because it is the grossest conditions in Kentucky right now. I don't know where you're at in the world, but it is so high humidity and so high heat. The heat index is over 100 and has been for weeks now, aside from the occasional dip. Like when I got outside a few days ago, there was like a shockingly, relatively speaking, cool day. It was like high 70s, low 80s Fahrenheit here. And the humidity was still pretty high, but I don't know, it was like 60%, which is, again, comparatively very low. It felt downright crispy to get outside. But mostly it's been in the like high 80s, low 90s, and with the humidity and the heat index, it's like up at 100. So I don't think I want to be out running, even if it's early morning. I wake up and it's basically that hot. Like the overnight temperatures are not that much different than the daytime temperatures. But also I'm a little bit sensitive around my back, and I just want to make sure that heals before I go out and do a bunch of impact, because I'm sure my running form isn't very good. But I've tried elliptical. We've got an elliptical and we've got a rower that I got on Marketplace, and I was like, I'll use this rower. But because I'm doing so much upper body pulling, I don't love being on the rower. I don't know if you all have found this. And I know a rower, you're mostly supposed to use like your legs and your back, but you're still finishing every stroke with like kind of your lats and then your shoulders and then your biceps. And I do so much lat, shoulder, and bicep stuff when I'm climbing. I haven't found the elliptical to be a good like complementary cardio exercise. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Somebody hit me up if you think I might be. But I do think running, jogging, elliptical, we've got an elliptical that my wife predominantly uses, but that I could use, and it's in the air conditioning. But just like the motion of the elliptical kind of weirds me out. But I like running. I like starting somewhere and actually like seeing the view change and all that. So I do think I'll get back into it because I am preparing for 24 Hours of Horseshoe Hell, which I just recorded an episode on that, like a noob's guide to hell, because this will be my first time that I do it. And I really need general cardio, I need lower body fitness, and I need lots of volume and upper body fitness. So I need everything. So I think I will get back into like running or rucking or something, but I'm not doing it yet. In any case, I do feel generally better. And the good news is I'm back into training hard, at least when life allows. And that was one of my goals on this list, was my training plan. So I reached out to Nate Drolet, friend of the show and very experienced coach and climber, Nate Drolet. And the reason I decided to work with him, and by the way, I'm paying him. We've done in the past, like my Road 2 series with Nate. And he's been wonderfully generous with his time to contribute on this podcast as a coach and just give me advice along the way. But I wanted to hire him as my coach for a couple of reasons. One, he deserves it and he works hard. And so I don't want to expect people to give me free things just because I have this podcast, even if they benefit from it from like a marketing standpoint. But two, there's also like a level of accountability to myself and to Nate or whomever I'm working with and paying, that as a paying client, athlete, there's going to be certain expectations, like accountability for myself to do these things because I am investing money and I don't want to waste that money, and accountability to the coach for making sure that they're writing me a good plan and checking up on me. And it's not just like every 3 months we do a phone call, but no, like we're texting and how's this going? And I reached out to Nathan about this in particular because he knows the Red very well. He knows me. We climbed together when I was out in Salt Lake, but we've had these conversations for years now. And he understands my goals. And my goals now even more clearly defined after having this conversation with Angus Kill on the show about kind of what's my why, is that I want to pursue mastery as a Red River Gorge climber. And originally the goal was I want to do flower power, my hardest route ever, which is an 8A or a 513B. And that is still the goal, but now filtered through this kind of overall overarching why purpose goal of pursuing mastery, my path to flower power is going to look a little bit different than if I just wanted to kind of tick the next box. And what that means in practical terms is that I need to create a bit of a pyramid or an encyclopedia of routes that will give me the skills and the strength and the fitness to not only do flower power, but then to do many other routes in the Madness Cave or in the Mother Lode. And in fact, many of my kind of college level courses that are going up to that 300 level, course of flower power. So my 100 level and 200 level routes are there in the Mother Lode as well, because a lot of my crew is going to be climbing there this fall. So Nate wrote for me everything from 12A to 13A routes that he wants me to, if not do, at least spend time on, that will help me then to develop what I need in order to do flower power. And I'm really excited about that side of the coaching. And then the other side is that, like, I just need to get better as a climber. I need to develop the skills as well as the strength and fitness. But I think even the skills are probably more important, like probably what's lacking the most for me, to be perfectly honest at this point, in order to climb that style, which, if you're not familiar with the route Flower Power or the Madness Cave, is like a really cool, this route in particular is like a really cool mid-12, so probably like a 12B that goes to a sit-down rest, and then it kicks back into like what is the famous Madness Cave of the Red, which is like 50 or 55 degrees overhung, and like kind of 3-finger drag and half crimp paddling, just steep as shit for, 60 feet or something like that. And then like there's a little bit of a head wall that it kind of eases up at the end. But I tried to bolt it at the end of last spring, and like I couldn't even get to the chains. It is very proper hard, but that's because I don't know how to climb that. And so we're going to work on getting me to climb that. So let me talk you through what my plan looks like that Nate wrote for me, understanding also my physical limitations, or at least low-hanging fruit, based on the critical force assessment that I did and that conversation with Dr. Tyler Nelson. And so I'm just pulling up my training plan right now. I'm just going to go into the calendar here. I like that there's like a calendar feature so I can see my rest days and my climbing days and just like how I'm kind of organizing my energy systems. But then there's also a list view, which is kind of nice. But I will talk you through, let me just like talk you through my last week. That's probably the easiest way to tackle this. So board climbing. So one limit board climbing session a week, because keeping my top end strength and power up will keep my critical force higher, right? The higher your strength level, if you will, the more it brings up every other kind of level below it. And we've talked about this in the past. Like this happened to me when I got super strong for Bulldog. And then when I went and got on like routes in the kind of low to mid 12s, every move just felt so much easier. And when a move feels easier, that means there's less stress on the physiological system. So maybe I'm staying more aerobic longer And because you can only go anaerobic for so long, you deplete those reserves fast. But if I can stay more aerobic longer, then I can do more of those moves. So the stronger and more powerful I am, the better my other kind of systems will manage. And so I've got this one limit kilterboard session, but it's not just a limit kilterboard session. There's a ton of volume to it as well. And that's what wrecked me when I first started this. And I've only been doing this for a few weeks, but I feel like I'm finally catching up. And that's because Nate wrote for me drills as part of my warm-up. So I'll do like a normal warm-up. I'll do my power warm-up, like my off-the-wall power warm-up, where I'm doing the slam ball and box jumps and speed pull-ups and speed push-ups and jump catches. And I did a video about that on Ryan Devlin Climbing in collaboration with Tyler Nelson and Camp 4, which I do as part of my warm-up, and I do some other general finger warm-ups and that kind of thing. And then I get on the kilter board and I do a couple easy climbs, but those easy climbs have a drill associated with them. So one of them focuses on generating momentum with the hips, like really exaggerating using the hips, which is something I think I could benefit from, because I've noticed that I'm generating a lot of moves with my arms first rather than my legs, which is just like a huge energy suck. You know, I had this conversation with Eric Hurst about endurance as well, and he was like, the first thing you need to do is plug those energy leaks. And for every energy leak you plug, that's like a huge amount of new fitness you don't have to try to develop because you're just not wasting as much. So that drill has been really cool. And there's like hover drills and twisting drills, and I won't bore you with them, but it's kind of like a twofer. I get a warm up, but I also get to work on a new technique or a kind of a skill. And that's been wonderful for me, because oftentimes I just think about training as like the physiological adaptations, but getting better as a climber as part of my warm up, what a bonus. And then, like one of the ones that's like been really challenging for me is one-legged climbing, because on my full ride, it's pretty steep. So like even at the shallowest angle, it's 35 degrees overhung, but I've been climbing more at like the 45 or 50 degree. And so like only being able to use one leg is wild. But it is a good last warm-up because much more of it lands on the fingers. But it also, you kind of find ways to like flag and smear, and you can use your other leg, just not on a hold. But you can like smear and push off and back flag and pogo, and that's been fun. And then I get into my session, and he has me doing 3 different types of boulders. One that's kind of a more traditional crimp ladder type problem. One that's like more dynamic and kind of jumpy, springy. And one that is more of has an open hand or drag type problem. Took me a while to find those, but once I did, he said, you don't want to send it on the first session, and you don't want to take more than like 3 or 4 sessions to send it. So it's got to kind of be in that project level, but not an epic project level. And that's been cool too, was like to really challenge myself to find problems that were distinctly different in what they would require me to do. And especially some of them being a little bit anti-style for me, kind of having to focus, like, for example, on a straight up like crimp ladder. I'm going to need that on flower power, but I'm also going to need that on the hardest 12A I think maybe I've ever tried, aside from perhaps bare metal teen. I don't know, but Chainsaw Massacre at the Red, which is like kind of the classic quote unquote warm up at the Motherlode. And hopefully one day it'll be a nice classic warm up for me as well. But it's a lot of crimping, just like relentlessly, and not a lot of resting. At least where I'm at currently. There's like one decent, like solid rest kind of in the middle, but mostly it's like a power endurance, like a crimp ladder. And that's just been notoriously hard for me. But if I can get better on my board doing that, I will get better out at the Red doing that. And so I like that he's pushing me into these different buckets and out of my comfort zone. And so that's my kilter day. I do those projects. I work on the projects as much as like gas as I have, and then I quit. And so I haven't sent any of those yet, but one of them's a V6. 2 of them are V7s, and one of them's a V6 that I chose. And I think I'm going to send the V6 today. So that should satisfy that goal. And then let's go on to the next day. So that was my Monday of last week. My Tuesday was doing my Treadwall, 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off. So that's kind of my general zone 2, if you will, cardio that Eric Hurst is a big fan of, and that I'm a big fan of. And it should be mostly like recovery. Now, when I first got on it, when I got back from vacation, it was not that. I think you guys might have seen me post, like I went to the gym too and did some routes, and like my warm-ups, my prior warm-ups became my projects that day. That was also a little bit demoralizing, was like kind of like these high 10, low 11s that I had been warming up on before getting on the harder climbs, and that I thought I would warm up this time because I'd sent them a million times, and I got on them and they like absolutely smacked me down. And I hated it. but I also kind of laughed through it, and I was like, all right, pretty soon these will be warm-ups again. And so I hopefully had a decent positive perspective on it. At least at that point, my back was feeling better. But similar thing happened on my Treadwall. Now, my Treadwall that I found on Marketplace is one of the older school ones, and so it's adjustable, but only minorly adjustable. It goes from like 5 degrees slab to like 7 degrees overhung. And so I only climb on it overhung because 7 degrees isn't very much, but at least when I first got on it, it felt like 20 degrees overhung. So I was supposed to be doing these very chill, like 2 on, 2 off, kind of in that 6 or 7 rate of perceived exertion. And I was like bricked in redlining and like falling off of it. But after a handful of sessions, I've now made it without changing anything. It's just maybe getting a little bit more fit and getting a little bit better with my technique. Now it is feeling very zone 2. And that is worth saying, you guys. I have been shocked at how much different it feels when I'm climbing well than when I'm not climbing well, or at least when I'm intentionally and very deliberately focusing on certain things. And this is one of the major elements of the Intentional Climber app that I love so much, is that when you start a session, it reminds you of your notes from the prior session. And so at the end of every Treadwall session, I say what went well, and then I say, what do I want to work on next time? And what I want to work on is starting every move with a push from my feet or a generation of my hips, and not pulling in on my arms or my fingers until I'm much closer to the next hold. And I'm reminding myself to place the outside edge of my foot on the hold rather than place the front of my foot and twist into the outside edge. And I'm reminding myself to not over grip. And just having these little reminders, I mean, they're things that I know I want to be working on, but having it pop up right as I start my session, it's like having a coach right there say, these are the things I want you to do on this lap, Ryan. And the impact of that has been profound. I just could not recommend it more. I mean, the app is free to try for 2 weeks, but even like, I don't know, if you just write sticky notes and put them next to you or something like that, the app works for me because I climb in a bunch of different places and gyms in my house and friends' houses and that, and outside. It's very much worth the price of admission. Although it's my app, and so I don't have to pay the $8 a month or whatever. But I think it's still very much worth it. It's like a little coach whispering in your ear, and it's much cheaper than any other coach. But if you can have a coach do it, that's great. I digress. Having those reminders and then getting on that Treadwall and implementing those skills, those things that I wanted to work on, have had a profound impact. Where, like the first time I was doing this, I think I got through like 6 reps of 2 on, 2 off. And now I can do 10 and it's really chill. And then Nate wants me to add like 10% every week. So I'm not going overstoker on it, but just climbing much better, that I think in time should kind of automatically, if you will, or subconsciously apply to my climbing on harder routes. Probably not yet, because I'm still being very deliberate and intentional about like reminding myself, like, okay, place the outside edge, generate with the legs. But I do think like the more I do that, the more it will translate, kind of naturally and subconsciously to my other climbing. And I cannot think of a better tool to do that on than the Treadwall. I can remind myself to do that on the kilter as well, because I'm doing 4x4s, and I have reminded myself doing that. And I do find that working, but that climbing is hard enough where I'm more thinking about just like trying to execute than trying to work on any specific kind of rudimentary technique, if you will. So the Treadwall has been a great tool for me on that. And that's 2 on, 2 off. And so Nate wants me right now doing about 20 minutes per session, 40 minutes a week. And so I've been breaking that into 2 40-minute sessions. So it's 20 minutes of climbing and 20 minutes of resting. So 2 40-minute sessions. And then on that day, I also was doing a strength workout. So on this current day that I'm looking at, which was like Tuesday of last week, it was Arnold press, deadlift, bent over row, crossover symmetry, and windshield wipers. I'm trying to work a little bit more core into my life, because climbing on really steep stuff is going to require, I think, better just body tension in general. So the deadlifts and then like the windshield wipers and that. And then I'm also doing weighted mobility on those days. So just like some kind of weight assisted stretching, like kind of pancakes and I don't know, some hamstring things and that kind of thing. If you want more information on that, I could send you like more details, but that's that day. And then the next day, I did a 4x4s. So or did I do a rest day? Oh, I did a rest day. Sorry. I did a rest day on that with just like a little stretching or whatever, but I didn't run or anything like that. And then the next day I did 4x4s because I wanted to be pretty fresh for those. And the 4x4s I'm doing on the Kilter full ride and at 40 degrees, but ultimately we want to kick it to like 50 degrees to better approximate the madness cave. And the 4x4s, I'm sure you're familiar with 4x4s, but if you're not, you do 4 boulder problems and then take a big break and you do 4 sets of that. So 4 sets of 4 boulder problems. And the thing here is you're doing the 4 boulder problems back to back. So it's almost continuous. You climb one, you drop off, you climb the next one, you drop off, repeat. And for me on the Kilter, Nate's having me do the same problem 4 times in a row. Oftentimes at a gym, you might do different problems at different grades. You might like go V4, V3, V2, V1 or something like that. But for me, because you would have to swipe to bring up the next problem, and I haven't created circuits yet, which the app does allow, but Nate wants me to do these like very much like he wants me to finish all of them. He wants them to be in control. So these aren't intended to be max level, like falling off or screaming on the last one. It's supposed to be more in that power endurance window, that's 70 to 80%, kind of a climbing version of what Tyler Nelson was having me do with the 7-3 repeaters. And so they've been like V2s and V3s, at least what I've identified so far. And V2s and V3s on this full ride at that angle can actually be pretty challenging. I did 1 V4, but then I didn't complete 2 of the laps. I did the first 2 laps, but not the second 2 laps. So Nate wants me to knock that back to either a different V4 where there isn't a distinct crux, or just make it another V3 because he wants me to finish them. But he wants them to be challenging, not cruiser. And so I think I'm finding the right level of difficulty there. But essentially, you climb 4 laps of the same problem and then rest for as long as you kind of can or your schedule allows to get mostly fresh and then do it again. And then we do it 4 times. We might add up, ultimately when I get through these in a pretty chill way, we're going to add a 5th set and then ultimately a 6th set he wants. We're really trying to build up my volume because climbing in the mother lode and especially in the Madness Cave is a lot of climbing. And right now, like to bring it outside for comparison, I can go outside and usually do like 4 routes in a day, and then I'm pretty bricked. And he wants me to get up to like 8 to 10 routes in a day where I feel good. And that is going to take some work. But it aligns well with my goals of doing Horseshoe Hell, and it's just more fun to climb more stuff. And so if I can have the fitness, the stamina, and the technique to be able to climb more routes, and of course if I have the time in my schedule, like if I don't have to get home to make dinner for the kids or whatever, then doing 8 routes in a day instead of 4 routes in a day is just that much more practice, that much more fun, that much more fitness, that much more experience. Especially if I'm projecting, I can do that many more goes on the crux or dial in the entry-level climbing that much better. So anyway, we're working on that volume, and the 4x4s are intended to do that. And I really like it. I mean, it's nice because I've got the Kilter in my basement, but it's a relatively short session in that when I'm resting for 10 minutes, I can do some stuff. I can do some emails or I can make a phone call. I've been using these Narwhal palm coolers. Been trying them out for almost a year. I might do a collaboration with them, but like they just sent them to me to try them out, and I've been trying them out, and I'm really liking them. Like if you've seen like the evidence on palm cooling, it seems to be really compelling in terms of how much more load you can take on in a single session, whether that's doing weightlifting or pull-ups or climbing. You kind of just like in cooling your palms, you cool your core temperature, and oftentimes our bodies call it quits because our core temperature rises so much that it triggers these things that like basically want our muscles to shut down. But if you can cool the blood in your body, then it keeps that signal at bay, if you will, or it delays the onset of that signal. And so you can get more quality reps in a session than if you don't cool your palm, or like the back of your neck, I think is one. But anyway, I don't know. I'll probably do like more on this later. But there's a company called, I don't even know what I'm blanking on it. The device is called, Apex. It's called Apex. The device is called the Narwhals. And I've seen other climbers using them. Anyway, I think I might do a collaboration with them at some point in time. But right now I'm just testing them out. And that's what I do in my breaks. So I'll climb those 4x4s and then I'll like cool my palms. Then I'll do a little bit of work or like go let the dogs outside or whatever. And then I'll come back and do it again. And that's a pretty efficient session for me. So that's the power endurance box. So we've talked about power and strength. That's the Kilter. Just straight up endurance, aerobic endurance. That's the 2 on, 2 off on the Treadwall. Power endurance is the 4x4s. And then another power endurance, because I'm deficient in power endurance, or that's where I want to improve. The other power endurance is either indoor routes or outdoor routes. That's ideal. If for whatever reason I don't have the time, then I'll do power endurance repeaters using like my lifting edge and my force board, like Tyler has kind of prescribed to me, if you will. But what would be better is if I could do that climbing. And so I've done two of those sessions. I've done a few of those sessions now, but like recently, in the last 2 weeks, I did two of those sessions. One of them I did outdoors, and I went to my favorite little semi-private crag, which is called Torrent Falls, and freaking epicked and struggled. Like the 5.9 plus warm-up was very hard. Then the 11B, which I've sent a bunch of times, but also it's like legitimately a pretty hard route. I would say it's probably more like in the 11C range. It just feels that way, at least to me. I fell on that one twice. I like two-hung the first one and felt like garbage. In the second one, I actually cruised and then just like made a bad calculation on a foot placement towards the top and then just came off. But I wasn't like flamed or anything like that. But I didn't send it. And then we went over and worked this really, really dynamic, all the stars 11D called Seek the Truth. And it's so cool. It's super super overhung. And there's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm just not sharp enough to come up with it right now. In any case, I gave it like a retro flash go. I had on-sited it a couple of years ago, but I didn't remember anything about it. And then I did a retro flash attempt and fell in the crux, worked out crux beta that made a lot more sense, and then sent it afterwards, but kind of by the skin of my teeth, which it should be, because 11D is really hard, and I think that, the conditions weren't like amazing. And so for me, where I'm at right now that was actually a very proud send, was to send that. I'd like to get to the point where I'm sending some low 12s here, even in hot conditions in the summer. That'll make me feel good going into the fall. And I think I'll get there. But right now, being able to do that was great. The other session that I did, the power endurance indoor climbing session that I did, was at the gym that I mentioned, where like the warm-ups became the projects. And that was humble pie, you guys. Oh my God. So humble pie. But that was good for me. And it doesn't really matter, because what I'm trying to do right now are just have sensations. And I'm going to get better if I just keep clocking in. That's just how it works. It's not like some big mystery. Like if I just show up, I'm going to get better. And I'm showing up, and I feel really good about that. And the fact that I'm in a place where like I'm getting smacked down on like 5.10s and low 11s at the gym is actually really cool to me, because I think we're going to be doing a plog in a few months here where I'm going to be sending hard 12s at the red. And it'll be really cool to see that arc. And it's not unique. It's like you can do it too. And I'm sure many of you are doing it. And if you're not doing it, you can do it. Let's just clock in together and let's get it done. So those were the climbing sessions. And then the other day that I had a rest day. I always need a rest day after climbing really hard. These people that go like 2 on or 3 on are much more fit than me. But I do think at some point in time, I will have the capacity to do that, and I'll be adapted enough to do that. And coming up pretty soon, I'm going to want to be able to do that, because I'm going to Squamish, and then I've got Horseshoe Hell. And so hopefully I'll get to the point where I can put in a bit more volume and handle it day to day. But the last day of that week was another 2 on, 2 off on the Treadwall, because I want to do 2 20-minute sessions, and then another lifting day. And I'm keeping my lifting days like I can do my entire conditioning, like weightlifting workout, in 30 minutes because I'm doing like 3 or 4 sets of 5 reps. I've been noodling with the idea of bringing in some more hypertrophy, kind of mixing it up and doing like 1 hypertrophy session a week. So maybe like 10 reps or 8 reps, just to put on a little bit more of that like capacity. But because I'm doing so much capacity climbing, I don't want to push it too much. My goal, one of my kind of like tongue-in-cheek experiments that I want to run this year, or at least for the next few months, is like, what's the maximum tolerable load that I can take on? Like a lot of people, and myself included, as a weekend warrior who's really busy, are looking for the minimum effective dose. And that can be really great and important to identify at certain times. But what's the opposite side of that? What's like the maximum allowable dose that I can take on without getting injured or like going into like an overtraining hole? And I don't know the answer to that, but fortunately I have Nate, who's like kind of keeping tabs on me and programming things. But I really do want to push myself and find out like what I'm capable of. And I've done that for the last few years, like working on Bulldog on the strength side and working on the force. Like I've really enjoyed the process of saying like, hey, what can I do? Like, what am I capable of pulling off? And I've got a pretty good track record, knock wood, of actually being able to do the thing ultimately. And I'm not taking on some like unachievable, audacious goal. Like a 13B will be the hardest grade I'll have ever climbed, and Flower Power will, without doubt, be the hardest route I'll have ever climbed, because stylistically it's also going to be very challenging regardless of what the grade is. But it might take me a year or two to get there, and I'm okay with that. Like Flower Power is something I want to check in on this fall, but I don't think I'm going to send it this fall. Maybe I will. I won't rule it out. But I've got these like really great 12A through 12Ds and even a couple 13As that Nate put on the list. And at some point in time, I might feel good enough and stoked enough to start really projecting Flower Power. But at the same time, I'm not going to like put blinders on and be like, okay, every session out is 4 rips on Flower Power and then I'm going home, because there's so many other great quality routes around that route that are on this list that Nate gave me that I'll no doubt be focusing on a million other fun things that are in that area and then other areas. Like I said, I've got some trips coming up. And so, yeah, I think the quality of the training, the volume that I'm taking on, and hopefully to some extent this maximum allowable dose will help me to do a lot of these things come fall when conditions get better. So that's probably a good transition to talk about what's coming up now. And so we'll talk about August goals. So as I'm recording this, it's still a couple days from August, but my August goals I've already identified and put into the app, and that is 5 days outside, which is super rare for August, but it's because I'm taking a trip. So 5 days outside, 1 at the Red. I want to get out to the Red 1 day and just climb something, anything, probably, relatively moderate. And then 4 days in Squamish. And I just, unless something crazy happens with like the weather or some sort of logistics thing, I know I'm already planning to get out 4 days. And 4 days in a row is insane, but I'm planning to take at least one of those days and maybe 2 of those days pretty easy. But my next goal plays into that, which is enjoy Squamish to its fullest. And what I mean by that is I want to, like I did last year, I'm going out for the Arc'teryx Academy, which, by the way, if you can make it out, I cannot recommend it enough. It is so cool. All the Arc'teryx athletes are there. Like Hamish MacArthur's doing a clinic, and Jonathan Segrist, and Ashima, and I think Amity is doing a clinic as well. And, like whatever, all your favorite Arc'teryx athletes are going to be out there. Jordan, our buddy Jordan Cannon. And but I'll be out there again with Chris Kalous, and we're going to be doing some podcasts. He and I are like hosting a couple podcasts on the main stage. And then my buddy Johan's coming out like he did last year. And my goal here, as I did last year, is to just sample the local delicacies. So 1 hard bouldering day, 1 fun multi-pitch day. That'll still be hard for me, no doubt, because multi-pitch is always like a little bit more of a head game, and just it's a longer day. So I'm going to do that with Chris. 1 single pitch sport day. And I'm looking at like some climbs that come out of the water. There's some really cool climbs out in Squamish that I've seen like pictures of and just kind of lightly researched, where you like wrap down and you kind of climb up out of the ocean. It just looks stunning. Like they could be 5/8. I don't care. I just want to enjoy the beauty. And then the 4th day is kind of a flex day. Like, where's the stoke going? How's the skin? How's the body? It will probably be a bouldering day, but it'll probably be like a real low touch bouldering day. But maybe I want to get out and plug gear again. And Chris and I, who are going to be partnered for 24 Hours of Hell, some breaking news. This just in, you heard it here first. Kalous and I, the Enormocast and the Struggle, are going to be a team at 24 Hours of Horseshoe Hell. And if you're not familiar with what that is, I've got a podcast coming out in just a couple of weeks that walks through all of it with these guys, Ari and Rob, who host the Ground Up podcast, who are really experienced at Hell. And they gave us a noob's guide to Horseshoe Hell. So that's like, it's, as the name suggests, you climb for 24 hours and you have to do a minimum of 100 pitches. So 100 pitches minimum in 24 hours. And Kalous and I might get together on one of those days in Squamish and just kind of try to work on some of our systems. It's a lot about like, how efficiently do you change belay and climber and communicate? And so we might get together and do that. Or it'll just be like a bouldering day where I get out and see how hard I can pull after having 3 other days of climbing. In any case, that will satisfy not only my 4 Squamish climbing days goal, but also enjoy Squamish to its fullest. And then my last day, or my last goal for August, is to prep for Horseshoe Hell. So that part of that goes into Squamish, but part of that's going to be my training plan. And working with Nate to see if there's anything we want to adjust. My guess here is that we won't adjust anything aside from like planning a smart deload prior to the event and prior to Squamish and after Squamish to recover from what will be, quite a bit of a hit to my system if I'm climbing 4 days on. But essentially, I think my training lines up well. I do want to get a little bit more general cardio and just like hiking and running in that. But I do think like the climbing that I'm doing, 1 day outside, 1 day in the gym, 4x4s, a hard kilter day, like all of that will prep me well for climbing as many 5.4s to 5.9s as I can in Arkansas in the summertime. So those are the August goals. And is there anything else that I want to talk about? Oh, mental game. Well, we talked a little bit about how I was bumming and I'm feeling a little bit better now. The other thing I'll shout out, and it's another tie into the app. And sorry, I'm just like psyched on the app, so that's why I'm talking about it. But also it helps me in everything that I do. Hazel Finlay did a series of meditations that she contributed to Intentional Climber. And so there's a mindset tab where, well, it's the general category is called Reflect. And so you go to the Reflect tab and then there's a mindset like hub where Hazel's got these meditations. And we have some others who are contributing content for this coming up as well. But they're wonderful. I mean, there's one you can listen to build gratitude when maybe you're feeling like I listened to when I was like really feeling sorry for myself. I listened to the gratitude meditation. And you send love out to like people in your lives and love for yourself. And it just like is guaranteed to release dopamine. And so I love that one. There's a body scan that I used like when I was jet lagged and trying to sleep. And it was like very relaxing. There's ones like to get ready. There's like a 90-second one that I listen to before sessions, especially when I go to the gym and I've got a lot on my mind and I'm like trying to think about work or whatever. She recorded it with the intention to help people just get focused for a session and say, look, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in your life. It'll be there. But your intention right now is to be present here with your climbing, with your gym, with your friends, with the moves you want to do, with the training you want to do. And it really helps me to like put away Instagram and put away work emails and just like focus on what I want to accomplish for the next 90 minutes or however long my gym session is. So I love that for the mental game. I just recorded a podcast with Hazel that's going to be coming out pretty soon, by the way, because she just postpartum climbed the hardest thing she's ever climbed. 514 trad, E10, so like sketchy trad. She's a boss. It was a really interesting conversation, by the way. So yeah, that's the thing on the mental side. And then on the nutrition side, I came back from Australia feeling like soft and heavy, and the result, the scale supported that as well. And I don't care, is what I decided. Like I got back and I was like, I should lose weight or whatever. And like now is not the time to lose weight. Fortunately, I had a conversation with my friend Johan and then with some other climbing friends. And they told me what I needed to hear and wanted to hear, which was like, yeah, it's July, it's August. Who cares if you're 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever it is heavier than like you kind of quote unquote like feel like is your performance weight for the fall. There will be time to get disciplined on that if I want to. What I need right now is a ton of calories to help support this extra volume I'm taking on, which is the maximum allowable dose as we've talked about. So I need a lot of calories for that. I need a lot of protein because I'm training really hard, and it's fine to like not feel like I'm in my kind of fighting position. And by the way, like I say that as I'm a, dad who's just a weekend warrior, and I've got plenty of belly that I could lose. It just kind of sits around my belly. So like if you look at me with like my arms and my back or whatever, like it all looks like Shredsville. And then I've just got like kind of like a pooch, like beer belly. Although I don't drink a lot of beer. I have like 2 beers a month. It's really like a pastry belly because I love my pastries, but that's okay. Right now, crush pastries and the pastries turn into gains. So that's where I'm at. I don't want to put on more weight. I'm still eating well. I did a video on this on Ryan Devlin Climbing too. Like when I got back from spring break vacation and I put on 10 pounds and then I lost 7 pounds and I lost 7 pounds in 7 days afterwards because most of it was water weight. I was kind of thinking that might be the case after Australia, but nope, it's just weight and that's okay. I'm going to turn the weight into muscle, and then maybe I'll think about doing some sort of performance cut, quote unquote, in like late October if I'm feeling really close on a project, and that might be a difference maker. And also it's just fun to kind of get like really dialed in on every aspect of training and performance during certain very short windows of a season. I just kind of geek out over that. But that is not something to be thinking about right now, so I'm not going to think about it. And I guess that should do it. We are at just about 60 minutes here. How wonderful. Kind of landed this plog right on time, especially for recapping 2 months. If I've covered something here that has sparked more questions than answers, just send me a message. I'm on Instagram, and you can DM me if you're a Patreon supporter, or you can just contact me on Instagram, and I'll try to get back to you. Or if you have any ideas on anything that I've said here, I always love hearing from you. And it's fun also to hear about what you have going on. So you can let me know how you're training. I've heard from some people recently. There's a friend, Danny Down Under. Was it Danny that just sent his project, or another friend from Down Under? There's 2 friends from Down Under. A friend who sent something in Naura recently, his first 12D, and now he's working on his first 13A. So shout out to you. Way to freaking go. And a couple others, actually, there was somebody who just sent their first 13A and was inspired by my Road to 13 episode. A friend who texted, and she sent her first V4 outdoors, which is freaking mega. I'm going to be like Strugglesville on V4s in Squamish, no doubt. I think I sent 1 or maybe 2 V4s my last time. Got on some 5s and 6s and didn't even have a chance. Of course, it was 90 degrees and it's granite, and I was just chuffing off of all of it. But also, it's just a different style. It's a very hard style of climbing there. So I'm not going to try to send anything hard. I just want to send fun things. But I digress. I love hearing from you. Congratulations on however your climbing's going and your training. And if you want to support me, you can support as a Patreon member, which is just the most direct way, because that just gives me money, and money allows me to keep making these shows, which are a lot of work. I don't have a ton of sponsors. I've got a handful of really great sponsors that I'm incredibly grateful for. But actually, the main way I make this show every week is through the support of amazing Patreon members. And even if you come and go, or you just do it for a month or 2 and then you quit, that's totally fine. I get it. I don't expect you to be here forever, although I'm very grateful for the ones who are. So that's a way to support me. And another way to support me is by signing up for the Intentional Climber app, which I think will make you a better climber. In fact, I can guarantee it. If you truly use that app for a month and you don't feel like it's making you a better climber, whether it's the preloaded coach plans that we have in there from world-class coaches, or Hazel's meditations, or the planning features, or the reflection features, or any number of other things that are in there. There's a lot of good stuff in there. If you use that thing for a month and it's not made you a better, more consistent, more accountable, and more effective climber, I will give you your money back. Just send me a message. And I think it's $8 or $9 a month or something. If you use code STRUGGLE when you sign up, you get a deal, you get a discount, and you also get a free, it's $99 finger training program. It's actually not just finger training. It's called 6 Weeks to Stronger Fingers, from Chris Hampton, who's, of Power Company Climbing. Chris Hampton's the freaking best. He's so smart. He's a legend. So I recommend just taking advantage of that. If you do that for 6 weeks and you're not a better climber as a result, and feeling fitter and stronger, then A, I'll be shocked, and B, I will happily give you your money back. So if you use code STRUGGLE, you get that unlocked for free, which is normally $100, and you get a discount on your month-to-month. So yeah, check out Intentional Climber. There's a massive update coming out, not by the time you hear this, but probably within a month, where so many features have been either tweaked or fully redesigned, and then some new features coming based on feedback from early users. So yeah, just understand that it's fairly early stage right now, and it's going to be changing. I think it's highly awesome and valuable right now, and I've been using it for a long time just as it is, but also know that there's a V2.0 that's coming out that is, I think, pretty revolutionary, and that will be coming out soon. We're just working out some bugs. I've been using it, but I've also been identifying bugs, and Jeff, my partner on it, similarly, he's been using it, but he's oh yeah, we got to make this a little bit clearer. We got to make this flow better. And so we're just geeking out over making it the best right now. But just know that's coming, and that's a great way to support me as well, and also to support you in your climbing, if you so choose. And that'll wrap it up. Thank you. Thank you just for being awesome and for being a climber with me on this journey. Let's get after it.